European history with Dr. Brovkin, and today we will talk about Russia in this during the times of Reformation, the 16th century. What was going on in the east of Europe? And we haven't talked at all about Russia, so it needs some introduction, a very basic introduction that is in all history books when studies of Russia. So Russia at that time was called Muscovy, because of its capital city, Moscow. But let's go a little bit back. The beginnings of Russia are probably 10th century is a good time to start, when it accepts Christianity from the Byzantine Empire. This is one of the most successful moves by the emperors of the Byzantine Empire, that they spread it to Russia, and it accepted Western, not Western Catholicism as the Poles did in Poland, but from Greece, from Constantinople, from Byzantine Empire. And so this is the 988 that the Prince Vladimir of Kiev accepts Christianity, and slowly it sort of spreads out to the rest of the population. So this is one important founding fact, Christianization from Greece. The second important cultural influence were the what they were called Varangians or Vikings, or Norwegians and Swedes. These people were at that time spreading all over Europe under different names. Sometimes they're called Normans. They go to northern France and to Italy and all over the place. But in northern Russia, they were pretty much they were the major force. And the expression goes from the Swedes to the Greeks. This was a trade route that, with a system of rivers, including the Volga River, it went from the Gulf of Finland, from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. And that was called from the Varangians to the Greeks, or from the Swedes to the Greeks. And these were merchant ships that were crossing Russia in the 8th, 9th, 10th centuries. And they became dukes. They became kind of like powerful tribal leaders, whatever you want to call them. And if you compare the villages of the Vikings in Sweden and Norway to the ones in northern Russia, they're identical. They look the same, the boats look the same, the faces look the same, and northern Russians do look kind of like the Swedes, were fair-haired and blue-eyed and so forth. So these two influences, cultural influence, commercial influence from the Vikings, who become dukes and rulers, and the religion that comes from the south, from the Greeks. So this is the beginnings of what is known as Kievan Rus. Kiev was the capital. This is the people who were there came down from the mountains that are called Carpathian Mountains there. Today, this is where the borderline between Ukraine and Hungary is. This is the birthplace of the tribe, which is called Rus. And it's today, even today, there's a tiny province called Ruthenia, which is where the original birthplace of the tribe of the Rus, who come down from the mountains towards the Black Sea. And on the way, they establish a town, which is called Kiev, and the territory around it is Kievan Rus. So Kievan Rus becomes Orthodox, Greek, in the 10th century, and then it has 200 years of relative peaceful, prosperous development. And in that time, the dukes, or the ruling families, they splinter, they multiply, and some of them move to the north. And one of them establishes a city of Vladimir, which exists today, and one of them establishes a city of Moscow, which is next door. And so they spread out, and each duke has his own court and his own land, kind of like in Germany, splintering going on with Germanic princes, basically ruling their territory, but having a nominal figurehead as a Holy Roman Emperor. Similar process goes on in Muscovy, but then eventually the ones in Moscow take an upper hand, but not yet. The next big event that happens is the invasion of the Mongols, which is 1220. And the Mongols come and destroy everything, as they did in Baghdad. They just basically wipe out the big cities. They hate cities, and Moscow and Vladimir and Kiev, they're all burnt and destroyed, and the churches are used as stables. And what they do when they conquer Rus is establish a pattern that in a way would save Russia for the future. And the pattern of the Mongol rule is that the local chieftains, they were called dukes or knyaz in Russian, they pay dues to the Mongols. That's it. So each year they collect the money and bring it to the Mongols, and they set up a state which is called Golden Horde. Its capital is on the Volga River, and further east is the core area of Russia, which is Central European plain around Moscow today. So that basically means that there is not much contact between the Slavic tribes around Moscow and Vladimir and Kiev and other cities and the Tatars. They are on the Volga, the dukes bring them the money, and they keep on developing. And then something happens which is historians call it the explanation of why the Rus or the Russians prevail. And that has to do with a kind of a basic demographic equation. Who multiplies quicker, the herders or the grain growers? And the answer, of course, is the grain growers, because the herders are people who herd animals, and the Mongols were actually herding horses. That was the most important animal for them. They ride a horse, they drink horse milk, they eat horse meat. They are horse people. The Russians are grain growers. That's what they do, and that's what they have been doing for centuries. So with these huge plains around them, they're quite fertile. Russian population grows and outpaces that of the Tatars and Mongols. And after 200 years, Russia is beginning to assert itself, and it's a slow process. It's not like one day they declare independence and that's it. No, it was step-by-step process where essentially Russian dukes would continue payment, but sometimes they would say less so, or sometimes they would go to battle and refuse to pay. In other words, there was a kind of a reassertion of Russian separateness and independence from the Mongols. So now we come to the 1400s. This is the time of the Renaissance in Italy. What does Russia look like at that time? There is no Russia yet. Nominally, they're splintered into these small principalities, and little by little Moscow, as Moscow prince, asserts his dominance by clever manipulation of tax collection, by delivering it quicker and better to the Mongols, and he kind of is primus inter pares, which is first among equals of these Slavic princes. And then comes the important first name that is truly crucial. It's Ivan III, and he rules at the time of Italian Renaissance in the middle of the 1400s. Now, if you recall, 1452 is the most important date in Eastern Europe, and that's the conquest of Constantinople by the Turks. So the center of Orthodox religion is no longer in the hands of the Greeks and Orthodox. It's taken over by the Muslims. And that creates a kind of a strange situation. Russia begins to, or Muscovy begins to feel that they are the ones that picked up the banner, and that they keep up sort of the center, being the center of the orthodoxy, now that the Turks took over the century. And so, thank you.